Give it up really big for Heather Reams and Anna Robertson, everybody.
Thank you. Boom.
Okay, we're gonna have some fun.
Yes, we are.
Thank you so much for being here, Heather.
Thrilled to be here.
You have been at this for 15 plus years.
Yep.
You started National Clean Energy Week. Now you're president and CEO of CRES. For those who aren't familiar with what you all do in Washington, tell people a bit about your work.
Yeah, so I'm going to blow your mind a little bit here. So I'm Heather Reams, and I'm the president and CEO of Citizens for Responsible Energy Solutions. We, based in Washington, D.C., we are Republicans who engage on clean energy and climate change action.
That's right. I love it.
So I think one piece is that you're like, oh, you're Republicans, so do you believe in climate change? Do you believe that clean energy is part of the future? Yes, all of those things. So, but what we're trying to do is bring Republicans to the negotiating table, for lack of a better term, so that Republicans and Democrats can come together and solve big problems. And climate change is a huge problem. We don't want one side of the aisle thinking they can solve the problem. We want both sides, Americans, working together to solve big problems. So that's the work that I do.
That's right. That deserves a round of applause. Let's sort of address the elephant in the room here. Mm-hmm. How do you drive progress around clean energy solutions when sometimes we're not hearing that message from the top, from the White House?
Yeah, for sure. So, when I first started at CRES, we were visiting with a number of offices, members of Congress, Republicans, who said we've never even heard from someone talking about climate or clean energy. Most would say, I'm not really sure what I think about climate, or the climate is always changing, or I'm not a scientist. Remember some of these terms you would hear? So we'd hear that. But then it's like, but I like the solar, I like the wind, I like all the above, I like all energy. How does that fit with what you're trying to do? Like, that's great. I mean, actually right now, if you can just treat wind and solar and renewable energy similarly to fossil fuels, let them compete in a pretty equal way. So that was kind of the first steps into it. But then there were some members of Congress who said, look, I think this is more urgent than the pace that we're going. I agree. How do I engage even more so? So that looks like maybe creating a caucus. So now there's a conservative climate caucus that was founded by then Congressman John Curtis of Utah, who's now Senator Curtis of Utah.
Which many people don't know is one of the biggest caucuses in the House.
It is one of the biggest caucuses in the House. And it's interesting because getting all of those members to join, and we were talking about 80 Republican members of Congress, they had to kind of agree that the government, the federal government, has a role in addressing climate change. Now, what that looks like can be anyone's guess, right? I mean, everyone's going to have a different way to how to engage. But that we've got people on the same page saying, yes, I agree, government has a role. The trick right now is that from the White House, the president has declared that climate change is a hoax. And that has a chilling effect on the vocal action in discussions in Washington. So it's been quieter than normal. There's in fact an article out today saying, does it still exist? Do climate Republicans still exist? They do. We're just going about this differently because getting stuck in kind of a bullseye of a president or the administration is really not a place that's going to be constructive for any member.
Yeah, and many of them will be gathering next week at the Conservative Climate Summit in Utah, which I know you guys are heavily involved in organizing. And a lot of people don't know that even happens, so it's pretty powerful.
So that's a Republican senator putting on an annual climate change conference in Ruby Red, Utah.
Yes.
Just want to make sure we got that.
Yes, exactly. And John Curtis has been doing that for the last 3-4 years. I think that's been.
This is his fourth year.
This is his fourth
first year as senator.
Yeah. Let's talk about the importance of local impact right now, because obviously we're in a room full of local leaders here. There's a lot of concern about the rollbacks of incentives and even grants as recently as last week that really did support local action. So how can we make progress in the face of some of those obstacles?
Yeah, this is a real challenge across, I think, the whole clean energy sector, and it's affecting I'm sure so many of you, and I'm kind of sorry we're going through that, because when you think when the government says, here's your award, and you do everything right, you expect to have it. And these rollbacks are not totally unprecedented, but at this scale, it's pretty large, and it really to focus a particular kind of area. So I'm not trying to make excuses that this is easy. It's not, and it's very unfortunate. One of the pieces that we found is the education of the congressional delegation that you have. Those members of Congress were excited to see that these grants were going into their districts. Part of their job of coming to Washington and coming from the West and coming East is to make sure they're representing you. And part of that is bringing home the bacon, so to speak. And then when they're not able to do that or it's rolled back, it really is counter to what they're trying to do. So the single most important thing, like step one, is making sure your delegation, your congressional delegation, both the senators and the member of Congress are well aware, or if you're in a multi-jurisdictional area, multiple members of Congress that they know. You also could request joint meetings that you're hearing from them jointly about what's happening and how it's holding things back. This is something that we predicted that's starting to happen. It's easy to say, sure, get rid of these tax credits, or okay, we're gonna roll this back. But then when you see what the impacts are to the communities, that's when the reality kind of hits. And I think we need to see the hard lessons learned. I'm going like, oh, we really need, members of Congress need to know, we need to fight for this. And this is a community issue. It's not a Republican or a Democratic issue.
Yeah. What are some of the things you're working on in Washington? What are some of your top priorities now that the big beautiful bill has passed and some of that has settled? Talk about some of the work that you're trying to push forward.
Yeah, a couple things. One, as you all know, the clean energy tax credits that were passed in the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, many of them were rolled back. I will say that a lot of, including the president, were saying we're going to get rid of all of those tax credits. Well, I'm here to tell you a lot of those tax credits still remain. The wind and solar tax credits are not going to be continuing as long, but they are still there and they will sunset. But there is a glide path for them. And both Republicans and Democrats recognize that we needed some market certainty, and you just can't pull the rug out from underneath these American businesses and industries. Battery storage technology tax credits are still in place. Nuclear tax credits are in place. Hydrogen tax credits are still in place. The direct air capture tax credits are still in place. So there is a lot that out of the IRA that continues today. There are removal. We lost a lot of the tax credits for energy efficiency, for example. So they're trying to figure out, we're working with them about how to make those more relevant. They've been around a long time. And then now there's a conflation of, well, do Republicans support clean energy and renewable energy or not? Because they didn't support tax credits. Well, there are a lot of Republicans that don't support tax credits at all. They never have. Thinking like Senator Kramer from North Dakota. He's never been a tax credit guy, but he's definitely an all the above guy. And he loves geothermal, for instance. Really wants to engage on that. So he was pretty critical in making sure we had a geothermal tax credit that could qualify as part of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, as we call OB3 in Washington sometimes. Now we're looking to, okay, what's next? So permitting reform. You guys, I think, are a room full of people who are dealing with siting all the time. A lot of this permitting reform is at the federal level, but we hope that the federal can also help the state and local in thinking about streamlining permitting. And that is a bipartisan issue. Things can't get built in this country, and things that we need urgently to be able to improve our quality of life, improve our air, improve our water. So that seems to be the place to go. What we're looking for is if maybe renewable energy is treated differently than fossil fuels, for instance. That would be a problem. We'd want to see an equal footing. And unlike the tax credits, the permitting bill would have to get 60 votes in the Senate. It's not going to go through a reconciliation process. So that means it has to be bipartisan. And I think that gets to kind of the meat of the issue, bipartisanship, Republicans and Democrats working together to solve big problems. And I think this permitting bill is going to be one of those where we hope to see a lot of progress on both sides. And both sides are going to have to give to come to the center and pass something. And there's a lot of conversations in Washington about this right now.
Yeah. Well, to that point, many people in this room live in Republican states, right? So what practical advice would you have for building consensus and collaboration with others?
So I've gone to a lot of the cities that are represented in the counties. I've been to a lot of them, mostly on my personal time. So I get sometimes the community is more blue or has a more progressive stance on clean energy and climate and getting to net zero at some date, which is awesome. But then you have to deal with the state that might be very red. The governor may not be on board. The federal delegation may not quite be there, and you're wondering, do we click? And the answer is yeah. I mean, they work for you at the end of the day, all these elected officials. So they've got to coexist in some way. This happens all across the country, but I think in the West it's different. The West cares the conservation, the outdoors. People move here for quality of life, and preserving it matters. And some of the first people that I saw engaging on climate that were Republican were from the West. Not because the air quality was bad, although I know Salt Lake, for instance, and the air quality can be terrible, but really it was just as a preservation of what's so beautiful outside, and you just want to take care of that. You don't have that as much in the East, so I think there's a natural place where people just tend to sit and agree. Like you have a basis that so many other places in the country don't have. You might get it in coastal areas. We want to make sure the Chesapeake Bay looks great or Tampa Bay is clean. Those things happen. But to have a group of people who are Westerners, it's almost all the same. Everyone wants to take care of that. So that's a huge asset that you can use to continue to build in. It doesn't mean also that everyone's going to agree with you, your goal of setting out to net zero at a certain date, for instance. But it does mean they do want to improve what the community wants. And Republican politics is really about local control, right? So using that to your advantage as well. And governors are also wonderful resources in their districts as well, not only with talking within the city, but also communicating to Washington what's going on. And I'll use an example. Many governors, but particularly Republican governors, reached out to the president and to Congress and the Senate during the rollback of the IRA for the OB3. And they were listened to quite intently. They weren't engaging as much on the House side as the House was putting together their bill, but when it got to the Senate and we had something to react to, governors were like, okay, well, we don't want that. We want something else. Also, senators working with one another or sometimes against one another. We mentioned John Curtis of Utah. The other senator in Utah is Senator Mike Lee, who is, I'd say, on the verge of a climate denier. He's more of a fossil fuel and nuclear guy. I'll talk to him about wind and solar. He'll kind of shrug and smile and pat me on the head. But he does listen to John Curtis and figuring out, because so much is happening in Utah on all the above, that he's really got to represent his whole state, and he recognizes that. So there are different ways to pull your levers to make sure that your voice is being heard.
Yeah, and I know a piece of this is communication. I mean, we started the cool down in large part because we felt that communications was really broken, and it was an untapped solution for climate, because a lot of people just talking different language, too much jargon, too much complicated language. And, it's become more important than ever, the word choice that you use, right? And in terms of how you get people on board. So what examples do you have of that in terms of how we can talk about these issues in ways that take the temperature down a little bit?
Well, I will go. Republicans generally have a challenge with saying, we're going to be net zero by 2050, 40, and having that goal without the clear blueprint about how we're going to get there, and reducing fossil fuels. I'm not going to commit to something without understanding what the whole thing is. And the fact is that getting to 2050 net zero is almost impossible to do right now with the technology we have. The last 15% is kind of tough to get there and keep the lights on. We can get there and decarbonize. We can do that. We just have, if you want the lights on, and I assume everyone wants the lights on. So if you want the lights on and you want to have the same quality of life that you have right now, or even better, how to get there. There's about that 15% that's there, and utilities don't know how to get there either. That's why the technology matters right now. That's why investing in technology and new sources of energy like geothermal or advanced nuclear are so important. So Republicans aren't going to say that first. Second, they talk more, their love language is more, it's not necessarily about, making sure we're keeping the air clean and the water clean and keep the worst effects of global warming. They're going to want to talk about jobs. They're going to want to talk about energy independence. They're going to want to talk about national security. They're going to want to talk about, a lot of people want to, especially in the West, want to also talk about, being able to have its own energy sources within an area so that you're protected from other areas that may be losing power and having some more independence. Some people move out west for that. They also move to Vermont for that too, by the way. They want the same thing. So it just depends on where they are. But I think it's not one particular message. But if you're saying, like, look, we have to do this because the climate is changing and we have a trajectory where we're not going to be living in a healthy planet in 20 years, I'm here to tell you that a lot of Republicans are going to say, so what? And you don't have to like that. But then it's like, do you want to win? Do you want to reduce emissions? Or do you want to be right and go, well, you have to agree with where I am? So I say meet people where they are. Like, look, if they're like, I like solar. I'm a Republican, I like solar. I like solar too.
Right.
Let's talk about solar. But I'm also going to say you have to like solar and wind. You have to hate fossil fuels, and you have to commit by 2030 to this goal, and by 2050 by this. And if you don't, you're bad.
Right.
And that's the kind of language we're dealing with right now, versus like, okay, I'm willing to meet you. If you want to, for permitting reform, Republicans, you want more pipelines. I want more transmission for renewable energy as a Democrat. Let's trade.
Right.
That's a very real scenario what we're going to see in a permitting bill. And by the way, everyone that I know who's in solar energy or wind energy is like, let us compete. We're driving costs down so we don't need the tax credits. Our costs are low.
Yeah.
People want what we have. We can compete. Let us do it.
And learn their love language, I'm hearing. Like if their love language is...
Isn't that book, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus or
Exactly.
whatever? It kind of is a little bit like that. And you just have to meet people where they are. So going and talking to Republicans and going like, okay, you like a certain kind of energy? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the jobs that are in the district from that. Let's talk about the investment in technologies that we're having, where the Department of Energy is investing in a lab, for instance. The high-paying jobs that it's bringing, the jobs that it's keeping in rural areas and not going to cities, so we're not seeing the great moves from rural areas to the urban areas. You could live at home where you grew up and also have a great paying job.
Yeah.
It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and it's the same thing for consumers. They want to save money, they want to live healthier, and those things trump, as much as they want to say they save the planet, it's really got to fit for their life.
So, you can kind of see there's like a pretty healthy middle ground here.
Yeah.
So it's not like here's exactly what you have to say, but it's a pretty broad middle ground. And you're always going to have those on the right and those that are on the left that are going to be more extreme.
Yep.
And you're not going to change their minds, whether that's 10%, 20%, that's okay on each side. But that logical middle is really where we want to start massaging and working and meeting people where they are. You'd be surprised how much we can do.
Yeah. Well, we're going to open up to questions in just a minute. I have a couple more questions, and so if you have a question, get it ready. What is your ask of folks in this room to support the work that you're doing in Washington? I know you mentioned it was really powerful to hear from some of the governors and some of the local officials.
Oh, yeah.
I know during that negotiation, Mountain Towns put together a group to send a letter to Congress. So what can we do to support your work?
Yeah, I have a couple of ideas here. One, you're in the trenches locally. I know how hard it can be. So making sure you're really thinking about who you're educating right up to into your own states, the governor, and then into your federal delegation. That can look like a fly-in when you're actually coming to Washington and sharing, but you can do virtual fly-ins too. You can come together and ask for a time online and do that discussion. You also can meet with the staff in district as well. Do not, and like, oh, we met with them 2 years ago, we're good. No, staff changes over time, dynamics change, you have to stay on top of them and being able to educate just the progress of what the project is that you're working on or the funding you're trying to seek or the progress it's made since the last time they met. You want to stay in front of them as much as you can. Second, this is kind of some very prescriptive pieces. We started at CRES on a federal level a champions program. And for us, it was engaging Republicans and saying, hey, great job. You voted for a bill that was really important. Think about as you're honoring people in your community, you're thinking about the bipartisanship and sending a signal in your communities of bipartisanship. You're not going to solve the climate issue with just one side of the aisle. You need both. I mean, that's my tenet, right, of bringing this message to you. Think about how you can do that. And yes, sometimes I will tell you, the Republican hasn't done as much as the Democrat. It's true. But also recognize them. Thank you. Thank you for your vote on so-and-so. Or why did you vote that way? You seemed like you were such a climate champion, but you ended up voting for this. Why? Ask the questions and understand the why, because it's complicated. I think don't make the assumptions, because I think some of the assumptions we had 10 years ago about where Republicans were on climate are not the case. It's not the case anymore. And the more they hear from you that you care about it and your communities care about it, from just an economic and lifestyle or whatever that is, it takes that temperature down to a place where you're having conversations and you can hear one another.
Love that. Okay, quick lightning round.
Yeah.
Most unlikely climate champion in Washington?
John Curtis of Utah, and I'll tell you why. So I thought when I was looking for climate champions, I would find like some hip, 30-year-old from I don't know, Florida or something, Texas. I don't know. I didn't think I'd get a mid-60s white dude from Ruby Red, Utah come out. So he's one of the top climate champions and is known for it and has made a reputation on that. So
for many years.
He surprised me, but he's also one of my good friends.
He's great. Yeah, I did a house tour with him and looked at his geothermal heat pump and his insulation and his bidet and his everything, his solar panels and his EVs. And I mean,
he shows his bidet off, by the way, guys. It's
he
amazing.
really does. Yeah, I will send you guys the video. It was awesome.
But he and I see the world very differently. I mean, very similarly. Very similarly. We do. Mm-hmm.
Favorite clean energy source or future sort of innovative clean energy?
I'm really captivated by geothermal right now, particularly about as they're looking at the technologies about where it can be almost anywhere. I mean, anywhere in the world you go, it's hot in the center of the earth, and thinking about bringing the energy around the world is really exciting. But of course, what we're doing in the United States matters. We have geological expertise in the US because we've been fracking and we've been drilling for oil. We can take that same expertise and put it to geothermal and transfer it over and really keep our workforce engaged, learn the lessons here in the US, and then be able to export that knowledge and expertise around the world. I think it's pretty exciting.
And any podcast or climate book that you'd recommend to the audience?
Well, so I'm a political nerd on some of this. So there's one called I think it's called Political Climate. It's a podcast, and then Politico is another journal I read, a rag I read, and they also have an energy podcast that I listen to as well. So they're not super interesting, but if you like the policy stuff, I mean, you'll love it. I mean, it's great. But it really gives you more of that insider information, more in Washington, but you can see how this fits really well into your communities as well.
We're going to open it up for just a couple questions. Let's see. I see one in the back there. No.
Getting rid of the tax credits for fossil fuels?
Subsidies for
fossil fuels.
So the question was, given, are there any discussions in getting rid of the tax credits or subsidies for fossil fuels?
We bring that up all the time.
If renewables want to truly compete, they
Right.
have to compete without those subsidies. They're competing with the subsidies.
Well, what's the great news about it is that they're winning. Renewables are winning on price even they'll win on price even without the subsidies. So you're going to have a subsidized and unsubsidized, and renewables are still going to win. If you let the market work, the market is going to grab the lowest price. That's just what's going to happen. So I think that demonstration is really what is going to help make the case for removing some of the subsidies for fossil fuels.
In the front here, or okay, you got one back there, Bryn.
Hi, Tanya Anderson, town of Jackson, Wyoming. We are a conservative state, and in fact, I think the one that had the greatest percentage of the population that voted for Trump in the last election. In our state legislature, we are now dominated by the Freedom Caucus, and hearing you talk about this conversation and both sides coming together and little bits of compromise, what we've seen in this shift to the Freedom Caucus is that has stopped. They'll listen, they may agree with you, and it will not change the way they vote on issues because they're being told, they're being texted how to vote, and they will do that every time. And so I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on how to work in that ecosystem where people will talk, but it won't actually change the decisions that they're making in this new game, this new climate.
Yeah, I hear your frustration there. And so I've been doing this work, over a decade now. So sometimes it does feel like it's a snail's pace, or even right now having a president who's at the top of the Republican Party saying basically the work I do maybe it doesn't really matter. Right? It's kind of, I know it's rough. First of all, you have to recognize you've got a long-term strategy that you're trying to do. Take it, and I think what I'm recommending here is bite-sized pieces, right? Engaging in the community level with the people you can work with. And I think what's so great about this conference is you all are individuals working very much granularly at your community levels, and that's where most things take place, right? So start there. You're going to work up to something that's in your state legislature. I've worked with your state legislature on protecting a wind project. That's providing wind for California. That project was protected by Republicans, by the way. That project has also been like a poster child for what's wrong with government and just too big of government and too many processes as well. I think that there is I'm seeing some people on the left, a lot of organizations, environmental organizations that are giving way to a little bit of ground to Republicans. So today, for instance, in our energy E&E news, it's an energy environment news, the League of Conservation Voters, head of policy, said, I'm not trying to greenwash, but I'm encouraged by what Republicans are saying about getting more clean energy on the grid. I mean, I almost spit out my coffee. Like, wow. So I see the left coming over to the right and saying, come on, let's work together. We know we don't agree, but we want to find some common ground. I think that's a huge part of it, because a lot of Republicans have felt like we're here and saying that climate exists. We've got however many members of Congress saying that the climate is changing, that the federal government has a role in doing it. Well, then the goalpost could be moved further down the road, and so you're constantly chasing for that goalpost, and you're having two sides of the different political aisles who don't trust one another. I mean, I don't know about you, but our country's getting torn apart bit by bit. And I think the first place to start mending is in our local communities, and start saying like, hey, tell me what you disagree with me and I disagree with you. Better yet, let's talk about what we agree on and how we can work together. And what does a compromise look like right now? And then how can we work to that perfect solution, or more perfect solution over the next 5 years? That's going to change, because then that representative in that district is going to be hearing about the progress that's being made. You're not going to change their mind necessarily unless you're going to put a pile of cash in front of them. And even then, there's no guarantee. It's got to be systemic. And it's got to be community groups like me and others that are getting in and saying, I'm a Republican and I care about this, and I'm here to talk to you about this. I'm a Democrat and I'm going to tell you we're going to need fossil fuels for the next 10 years. And I know that, but I want us to get off fossil fuels. But I'm willing to be in the middle. That is that's when you're going to have that logical 40% in the middle starting to legislate, and it starts to drown out the fringes that you're seeing in your legislature.
I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll, I know Heather's going to be sticking around for a little
and
bit here
I'd
at
love
lunch.
to talk with any of you. I've got a few hours here before I have to head back to Washington.
Hi, my name is Genevieve Oswald. I'm a counselor in the town of Taos. Thank you for this conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you for the work that you're doing. We had some really courageous young people up here earlier.
I saw.
And I'm curious, I like this conversation around love language, and our current president's love language seems to be lawsuits. Is your organization willing to file a lawsuit against this current administration for their destructive acts towards climate change?
We don't do lawsuits, ma'am, but we don't as an organization do those lawsuits. We have a vision of more carrots, less sticks. So a little bit more, where can we agree? There are other organizations that do that and do that well, and we'll let them handle that. There are other organizations that don't do compromise very well, and we'll stick to what we do best.
Well, there are many approaches to solving this issue, and we need all of them. So thank you
I think
for
meeting people where they are is, I think, really, really important. There isn't one single way to do this, and I think that's why in your communities you have so many unique projects and ways of solving problems that really need to be elevated and brought up to decision makers. Don't assume they know. They don't.
Well, thank you for your time. And this is an amazing resource, I think, for everybody in the audience as well to plug into the work you're doing. So thank you,
Thank you
Heather.
for having me. Appreciate it.